So anybody here either Australian or studied in Australia? Right, so you are what we think is a part of a very valuable resource for Australia in that there are over 1 million Australians living offshore and 850,000 of those are professionally employed. And if you add to that over 2 million Australian alumni of Australian universities and mainly based here in Asia, that's a really important resource for Australia to be tapping into, and that's what we try to do with a lot of our programs.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? How did you get here? Uber? No? Gojek? Bluebird?
Hi, my name's Karina. I've been in Indonesia for 5 years. I'm Australian, but my father is actually Indonesian from Makassar, so it's good to see the consulate opening there. Right now I work at Google in strategic partnerships, so helping lots and lots of small, medium businesses go online, but scaling through local partners. Before that, I worked with Boston Consulting Group, and before that, I worked with a startup tech company that uses mobile phones to reach base of the pyramid. So a bit of different experience in different tech spaces.
Good evening. My name is Ajay Mathur. Been here a shade under 5 years, but I think we're getting to a phase where Indonesia is getting very comfortable. So we'll see where it takes us. But I work with ANZ. The bank here, ANZ is one of the largest investors in Indonesia if you consider our organic business and a large financial stake that we've got in one of the local banks here. So I run the consumer business and act as the deputy CEO as well for ANZ here.
Nathan Bell from Telstra. I've only been here for 1.5 years, so clearly these two or three have a lot to teach me about Indonesia. So Telstra is a joint venture by the two names, as you can recognise in the title. It's a very exciting time for us as well because there's literally a startup. I've worked for a number of startups in the past, but doing it from scratch, from the foreign investment through to bank accounts, through to visas, etc., has been a very interesting experience. Prior to this, working with a number of different telcos across Europe and Asia as well. So coming here has really, for us, been about how do we take some of those learnings from other markets, but more importantly, how do we take the market that is Indonesia, which is very digital in terms of the way that it engages the marketplace. So as a startup, we didn't really have a choice, I guess, in terms of whether we're going to go digital or not. It was simply a case of, well, that's what it needs to be. So that's what we embraced from day one.
I will start by asking the first question to panelists, and then I would love to hear what all of you have in mind, and let's have a discussion based on that. So when we talk about, so I mentioned earlier about expectations and what I call the great expectations, and all of you running big companies know that especially in the past few years with the economy slowed down, every dollar matters, right? So 64% respondent expect 10 to 25% revenue contribution. However, these respondents have just entered digital partnership in the past 12 months. The ones that have entered more than 12 months have lower expectations, meaning they know in reality it doesn't work out that way. So if I can just ask you, what is realistic in your benchmark in your companies, and what to expect from a digital partnership?
So I think Indonesia is at a really interesting stage of digital partnerships. If we look at countries like India that are, say, 10 years advanced to where Indonesia is today, those digital partnerships and those investors are already starting to make money. I think Indonesia is at a different stage. So what a lot of digital companies are trying to do right now is to get their product out there on a free basis. I'm not just talking about Google, by the way. I'm talking about lots of digital companies here. And slowly the strategy is to upgrade those, to figure out who their most valuable customers are and upgrade them to a paid service. With the strategic partnerships that I do that actually look at trying to get small, medium businesses online, my strategic partners want to make money from day one, of course, otherwise they wouldn't do it. But they do understand that their existing business will be the most profitable for some years to come. But what motivates them to do these partnerships is that they can see the change in the market. The consumers are on their phones, and that's where businesses want to be, and I think that's the appeal for the long term. So I think that 10 to 15% is reasonable over a number of years. I don't think that that comes at day one, and it shouldn't, especially if you're in a business like mine, which is trying to get very traditional businesses online. The type of spends that you'll see is going to be low to start with, but as the market matures and looks more like India, I think we'll start to see a lot more companies making money from this digital.
So over a number of years.
Yes, definitely. Not in year one and year two. I think if you have a really amazing product that you can get people to pay for straight up, then every investor would want to invest in you, and they'd probably tell you to lower the price anyway. So
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Look, the point here is that if I just take this head on, I think it's not just about revenue. We're seeing the opportunity around reducing costs as well. So it's all dropping to the bottom line. But what has happened is that the customer choices have clearly moved to digital. The always-on customer is now wanting to transact with his, with ANZ or with his bank over his phone, at his convenience. So empowerment has become really crucial. It's no longer, the bank calling the shots, it's the client calling the shots as well. As a result, I think we've done all of the stuff over the last few years, which is, internet, mobile, smartphone-based applications, GPS, to make sure that we're in the mind of the customer every time he's making a financial transaction. That's the big piece theory here. But having said that, revenues, today we make, less than 5% of our revenues come through digital-related activities, so to speak. But the big impact that has happened is that in terms of our marketing spends, and they're not small, we used to spend about less than 5% of our marketing spends on online or digital-related activities. Today, that number has gone to 25 to 30%. And yes, a chunk of that is going to Google as well. Because as we're using them up to look for search optimization, wherein every time a customer is signing in a credit card, personal loan, home loan, then ANZ's got to appear right up there. So there's a lot of benefit we've seen in the past. The other piece that we've seen in terms of financial benefits is nothing now goes to clients from ANZ on paper. Everything is digitized. So if you want something from ANZ, then it is paperless. So it's the whole concept of making the visible invisible. And as a result, a chunk of money has been saved. But the whole P&L impact of that, I think, has been very significant. So, and I'm sure that's going to increase over time.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Nathan?
So I think one of the things I loved about the data point that came forward is that it's suggesting that having a digital strategy is synonymous with marketing. So if you think about it, okay, we're going to run a marketing campaign, or we're going to spend a lot of money on collateral, or we're going to buy a bunch of gifts. What's the ROI we're going to get on? How quickly we're going to see our revenue back? I think what people are forgetting, and I think this is why you're seeing that data point in terms of those that are doing it the first year versus those are longer term, are realizing it's not just about how they're going to engage the customer. It's actually the transformation of their business. So if you think about how we went from having small shops on corners to having chains to having channel models, all of these things were transformations of the business chain. Digital is just the next step, the next evolution of that. So it's really more a choice of, well, if you decide not to do it, that's fine. But then competitors are going to basically run away with that market, because not only are they going to be visible, but the way that they expect people to engage is going to be right where they want it. So if I look at our space in particular, we could quite simply have said, right, we know what Telstra does, we know what Telcom does, we'll play inside the box and basically just do as what we're expected to go and deliver. If we did that, we would basically become the same functions that everybody else. We'd have no differentiation. So for us, digital very much became a vehicle to demonstrate what is the capability that we have and how does that impact the market. And the reason I share that statement with you is we're entering into an era of always-on, ready now, I'll buy it when I want it type of environments. So, if you think about the bank, appreciate you're not seeing probably the revenue you want to just yet, but the first thing they think, oh, loan, right, let me go online and quickly see if I can find a loan that works for me. Or let me go into Google or Apple or whatever it's going to be and find an application or a partner that I want to be able to go and use. It's not a case of, right, let me write down a list and then I'll send an email or out to whoever I want to go and look at. So I think we just have to bear in mind that digital isn't so much a marketing campaign. It's not something that's going to deliver a very specific ROI in a short period of time. It's a transformation of the business. And that's why seeing companies actually now establish head of digital businesses in their organizations because they recognize it's going to impact everything that they do.
I think maybe if I can speak on behalf of the Salim Group side of the business. Recently, I think it's been announced that we are going to do something with Lotte, the Lotte Group in Korea. I think I can't reveal much yet, but it's more along the lines of the e-commerce space. And I think in terms of, in the past month, I think that's the most recent news that we have. But on that note, in the marketing side, we've been working quite closely with Google. I think we've worked quite closely with YouTube as well. We've done a few YouTube campaigns starting. I think one of our more successful ones, there's two. One is for our latest Indomie campaign for our the flavors. So it's to introduce the flavors. We created two music videos. And another one is also for Super Me flavor. We did more of a a cooking demonstration on how to personalize your. So that one actually did quite well, and I think our sales so far has been quite, the growth has been quite significant. So on that note,
you see the difference between using sort of.
I think the difference. I think the difference that we notice is actually you can put more information in terms of our YouTube advertising channels, and we can make it a little more fun and definitely cost efficient.
So I think for us it's been very interesting because obviously you've got Telkom, which is an incumbent in Indonesia. You've got Telstra, which is an incumbent in Telstra in Australia. And now we're trying to basically get these two businesses to work together. Now, Telkom obviously is the largest network provider, service provider in Indonesia, nationwide capability. Telstra's got a long-standing services business, and sort of telling these guys, shake hands, put some ink on a paper and everything's going to be fine, was the very beginning of a very long journey. So I think one of the parts that our former president director and current president director shared is that you need to establish your own culture. So having a blend of people, not just from Telkom or Telstra, but actually people from different backgrounds has allowed us to go and redefine what that culture looks like. And I think a couple of interesting steps that we went through in terms of what we were trying to define as Telkom Telstra was, what is the future of Telstra going to be, but equally what is the future of Telkom going to be, and trying to find the synergies, the sort of shared vision from that perspective. So Telkom is very passionate about their digital first strategy. Telstra is very passionate about moving into cloud applications and higher end services. So we really latched onto that as that sort of common factor. So although you have these fundamental differences that existed at a core cultural aspect, we're able to raise the bar. The other thing I sort of share with you that was quite interesting is when we introduced Telkom and Telstra in terms of how we were going to serve customers, what level of information we were going to share with customers, they were both a little bit shocked because it took them really out of their comfort zone. Because yes, you can have this ambition to be digital, to suddenly change the way that you want to approach the market. But when you actually start doing it at the pace that a startup actually can do that versus two very large parents, I think it sort of woke them up in terms of, wow, this is what the future is going to look like. So I guess one of my very proud moments is when Pawal, who's the head of Enterprise CFU in Telkom, went from, oh my gosh, this is a huge step to, wow, fantastic, this is part of Telkom. So I think it was just that transitioning piece we had to make in driving that cultural awareness and recognizing that it wasn't actually going to be the technology that was going to slow us down. It was making sure that both parents and the JV itself all went together on the journey.
Is that also pose a barrier to the business performance? The fact that you have the cultural differences and are ironing things out and things like that in the first few months?
I think it was more in terms of nobody wants to be first. We develop a capability which is very unique into the Indonesian marketplace, but also, as we've learned now, very unique into the broader Asian market as well. Everyone looks at it and does that wonderful. It's like going to a car room where there's the very first Tesla that was ever created. Everyone thought, wow, that's a really, really awesome car. You're going to buy it? No. I'll wait for someone else to buy it first and see how they go. So I think that's what we felt, is in terms of we've got this amazing capability, and we were so proud when the first couple of customers said, okay, I'll give you a little bit of infrastructure we want you to manage for us. And now that started to snowball. So I think we just had to be patient. We had to, as I said, make sure that everybody was on the journey with us. And that's probably the biggest piece about that move into the digital space that's most important. You can't leave anybody behind. Because if you leave anybody behind, they're going to start to become the protagonists of, look, I don't like this idea. It's not sitting comfortably with me. I don't want to do it. But as long as you find that commonality, as long as you bring everybody with you, and you're very patient, it'll work out.
Okay, thank you. Ajay?
Yep. So quite similar to yours, though I think on a different scale, because banks have historically been less amenable to change. In this particular incident, I think we've seen the fact that you need a real sponsor for making a change happen. Also to note that in a bank, it's like a zoo of systems. Over the years, systems have come, got added on to what you have. Developers have gone, and they've left their little mark behind. So you've got a whole array of things which don't necessarily speak to each other, and that becomes the first reason why things can't be done digitally. So to go across that culture, I think it just takes the fact that there has to be a success, and to a very large extent, as I said before, customers have forced the change. When you see somebody making the move and you see your own clients shifting their business elsewhere, then it becomes a catalyst, for activating digital. And I've been very impressed by how fast I think the industry's moved, how fast ANZ has moved over the past few years to try and really, in a way, at least in Indonesia, we kind of pride ourselves to leading in the international bank space on digital activities as well. So it's not been easy, and I think there are tight times, as you spoke of today. So the revenue dollar needs to come before the expense dollar is put out. So it's going to be find a fine balance between how you deliver the next digital partnership. So
Interesting. Thank you. And thank you for being so honest, by the way, and not saying that it's all rosy and fine. Karina?
So I have 5 partners here in Indonesia, ranging from traditional media magazine agencies all the way up to like the forefront in e-commerce and logistics. And all those partnerships have growing pains. Not at the CEO management level though. I think the vision of a lot of these companies, they wouldn't be partnering with Google if they didn't have a vision. The growing pains actually come down to implementation and working with their very traditional salespeople and getting them comfortable with the idea. I think we really hit a sweet spot once we had a proven success with 1 or 2 small, medium business customers that were using our product, because at the end of the day, a lot of the companies that we partner with, their mission is aligned with mine, which is to grow small, medium businesses in Indonesia using digital. So once there were those 1 or 2 success stories, we worked on kind of marketing those within the sales teams and finding champions within the people that will actually be implementing this digital strategy. And I think that's really key here, especially when people don't, when you talk about digital, people get a bit scared, but if you talk about what the vision of that digital product or technology does to the end customer, I think that really helps. From when I speak to more experienced partners in other markets like Taiwan or Singapore that have been around for quite some time, and I ask them how they started, they always say that we just hire smart people. And you've got some great universities here and a lot of Indonesians that have studied abroad, but great universities here with top-notch engineering schools. And I think that you do need to do a lot more of the training here because the digital wave hasn't totally hit yet. I think it's happening now. And that's how they succeeded in Taiwan, 15 years ago, or in Singapore, 10 to 12 years ago. They just hired smart people. So I think that's the route that you go on, and that's the route we take at Google as well.
One thing I was going to add, I was quite surprised for myself. A lot of the technology vendors are actually sponsoring university programs now, which completely blew me away. And it's really, really exciting. So I was quite surprised that there are thousands of engineers coming through. And I'm not talking the traditional engineers, I'm talking really digital engineers who are starting to understand cloud security, collaboration, communications at a whole new level. So I think that's really exciting. The other part, in terms of Dr. Lee's comment of the number of students who are going to Australia for higher education, I think as they keep coming back to Indonesia now, in terms of starting up their own business and looking to drive their own growth, you're going to see that population expand rapidly. So I think we're on the verge of a very big wave of a digital generation, not just using it, but understanding how they can create new service, new capability off the back of that as well.
So, look, you make a really good point, because the difference in, at the bank is that we've got to catch the train running. We've got a bunch of people already there, and many of them who are leading businesses are plus 35. So, often the debate has been that the question that is asked these days is, and it's part of now the, then if you want to get promoted, then one of the key questions is, how savvy are you in digital? So the first few questions that you used to get asked is, how savvy are you in digital? And he said, oh, sure, I've got a Facebook account, I'm on LinkedIn. And the reality is that that is not what we're seeking. We're seeking, how can you build relevance of digital to your space and line of business. So we've been trying to run some programs, and again, I know we keep speaking about your firm, and that's probably where the revenue is getting made. But we've been getting our product managers Google certified for all kinds of marketing activities, and as I said, a third of our money is now getting spent online. So our marketing managers, our product managers need to be really, really crisp when it comes to how they use technology, how they use the digital space, how they use social media to translate into products and propositions. So that's been the slightly different, flavor at our end. So hopefully over time, we'll be able to get some of the fresh engineers to come in and build up the blood in the company. But meanwhile, we've got to train up the people we have.
Google does do a partnership model everywhere in the world, and that's how it scales. It doesn't have a lot of people here on the ground. So we kind of take what we know globally in terms of structuring partnerships, how to do things on the ground. But I have to say, compared to my colleagues in other markets, it has taken much longer for me to get my business going. And for me, I think that's a result of where the market is at in terms of digital awareness, because I'm talking about SMBs. We're not doing anything in high tech. Maybe Nathan can comment on that, but it's not all rosy for sure. Like, I've been here for a year and a half, and I don't think I've gotten to the state of the business that I thought it would be looking from the outside in. I used to be consultant before this, so I'd never really had to implement anything from day one till the end. I'd done parts of implementation, and it is much more difficult being on the other side. And like I said, compared to other markets, taking a much longer time. But those local partnerships took a long time because I had to do my due diligence on finding the right ones. And I only have 5. I could have much more than that because a lot of people knocking on the door to do a partnership with Google in this space. But those businesses weren't right for the partnership. So finding a local partner is really critical to the success of my business. And it is difficult to find the right one.
Being a global bank, we've, all of our processes and systems and initiatives are generally run standardized across markets. So there was an opportunity for us to do what we were doing in Australia, in Singapore, everywhere, and copy the same model here. We chose, however, to work with an Indonesian local provider who would implement the whole sphere of internet and mobile banking for us. Just the outcomes. We're able to deliver it in 6 months at less than 1/3 of the cost, and still meeting all the group protocols when it came to security and risk management. So I think in areas where it is still many years behind, so to speak, some of the other markets, but I think we are seeing significant development and the ability to deliver stuff here which is quite comparable to what is happening elsewhere. But if I take another example, and this is where we've chosen a slightly, what I would say, from a bank side, is a pretty high-tech area. We've taken the whole area around data, and we figured out, we figured out that in data, we've got to be working with a company that is not Indonesian. It's based out of Singapore, and the whole premise here has been that the bank knows everything about a customer. It knows who you are, what you do, what you like, what do you do in your free time, where do you go, all of that data. But if you were to harness the power of that and turn that into a very intellectual and tech-based stuff, we were not able to find the providers here. So we had to step outside, and we found a provider within the Southeast Asian region that we today have started a relationship with, and it's extremely enriching.
Telkom Telstra has become very much a melting pot of technology companies. So in our little group of 90 people, the representatives of 16 different technology companies from Indonesia. So not from hiring people in Singapore or Hong Kong, but all hired locally. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the talent's there. You just have to be very selective. And now we're trying to establish graduate programs so we can start training and development for the next wave to be able to come through as well. So the opportunity is there. You've just got to be able to sift through it and bring the right people.
This is not a monopoly of Indonesia. I think this is also applicable in any developing countries like Indonesia. Now, we are not part of the developed countries yet, because opportunity to me is always in the developing countries, because the risk is also there, That is my opinion on that one. And for the foreign investor who used to deal with the more structured market or something like that, I totally agree with you that you have to pass through all the tick, something like that. But for the sense of market, again, this is opportunity. If you don't have any gut, to strike the deal, someone else will. I think this is the issue. And to me, Australia is very close to Indonesia. And I do believe, because I dealt a lot with Australian company before Telstra. With my counterpart was OTCI in the past, OTC International in the past, and we have a good relation actually with Australia. Australia is geographically is close to Indonesia, and by culture also they know well Indonesian culture. Something. We have an issue today because this is with regard into the public services, public transportations, where this is affected to the conventional public transportation, the taxi, who already has been established for years or something like that, where suddenly there is a technology that can provide more convenient services to the end customers and more affordable price, regardless whether there is a subsidy on top on this business model or not. It's another issue, so this is the challenge, But for some other sector, such as particularly on the marketplace, for the e-commerce marketplace, they don't have any issue on this one, because they do not deal with they don't compete directly with the conventional or traditional company like in transportation sectors, So that's why in some sectors, I think we will have an issue that we have to address. And this is not, by the way, Uber things or Grab is not an issue in Indonesia. It's also applicable in everyone. It's global issues, but every countries they have their own position. Some of them rejected this Uber's thing, but some of them even licensed the Ubers with the conditions like what was happened in Moscow. Even the city of Moscow allow Uber issue the permit for Uber, provided all the data necessary by the city of Moscow has to be provided by Uber things. We are now in the process. How can we deal with this issue? Number one, we have the regulations, we have the law, we have an act that we have to follow, we have to respect, and we have to follow. And then, but in the other hand, there's a lot of aspirations for the people to have better service, more convenient services with more affordable price. So that those are the facts. So that's why we have to deal with this issue. The president, I have discussion this morning with the president, and president gave me the direction how to deal with this issue, fairness. But we have again to see the efficiency, not only for the company but also for the country, because this country, Indonesia, we need to position Indonesia as a competitive as possible in the international marketplace. Like it or not, Indonesia is competing even with our neighbors. My boss keeps saying that when we have the summit, we are hand in hand like this one in the pictures, but back in our mind, we are competing with them. Yeah. So that's why I think Indonesia is moving toward more FDI, environment friendly or something like that. Look at in the e-commerce, I think with the recent policy that the foreign investors, until a month ago, foreign investors are not allowed to have some stake in the e-commerce, particularly in the marketplace, right? But right now, the foreign investors are allowed to have some shares, But until, up to the 10 billion net worth is reserved for Indonesians, because this is considered under category of the small medium enterprises. But between 10 billion to 100 billion rupiah, this is equal to 8 months. I think 8 months is peanut for you guys. You guys can have the 49% shares, and beyond that one, practically you can have 100% minus 1 shares. So this is one of the policy that we issue to position ourselves in more FDI friendly. It's not only that one. We are now discussing with the OJK, or Financial Service Authorities, and IDX, Indonesia Stock Exchange. How can we create some sort of the technology board? Now, we are welcome to the foreign investors, but we also have to provide an exit strategy for investors, which is technology board in the IDX in the Jakarta, in the Indonesia Stock Exchange. This is some sort of the friendly environment that I'm talking about. Again, instead of they listed the company in somewhere else, and the benefit will go to some other countries. Why don't we improve our regulations, our regulatory environment here, and becoming more friendly to foreign investors? This is the way. This is why we want to position the Indonesia as competitive as possible.
Yeah, I think it's really refreshing to see a lot of these ideas, and Google's already, looking at some of these programs around helping, the developer ecosystem, helping startups, and working with the government to do that. So I think it is a difficult market to be in, but so is any developing economy. But the opportunity is here, and I think if you have people on the ground, if you find the right local partners and work together with very mutual benefits, then I think it can be very, very rewarding.
And from an ANZ point of view, I think what I would say to everybody here is that we have been gingerly putting our foot out there in terms of looking at digital partnerships, technology partnerships, and some of the things that I think it's also eye-opening for us. And we spoke about this data piece that we did not realize we have so much of information about our clients that we frankly didn't know how to use. So we worked with somebody who's fresh, off without any previous bounds of thinking, and they came back to us and said, look, you can run algorithms, you can run so many different combinations of how you can do recommendation engines at banks, just as the way Amazon does, just as the way Traveloka does, just as the way Google does. So it's changing, dramatically changing the sphere of where, how banking gets done. And I think it's only happening through partnerships. I mean, the bank could not have done it alone. We've been sitting on data for hundreds of years. We just didn't know what to do with it till somebody came along and told us, how to deal with it. So it's a very interesting, and I guess it's a topic for the future.
To finish on, I think the digital disruption is very much about taking the opportunity. Telstra was a startup just 1 year ago. It was two parents coming together to try and do something fundamentally new, which I think a lot of people had question marks about, but I think now we've actually been able to show we can make it work, and we hope that it will start creating a conversation for other partnerships, whether that is cross-border, whether that is within Indonesia, of what is possible in the digital space. I think digital has quickly become just a way of life. It impacts everybody, impacts every industry. So I think the programs, the examples that you just shared, I think is a great opportunity for the Indonesian government, not the Indonesian government, the Indonesian economy to move to the next phase of growth and leveraging digital in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think because our time is up, I think I'd like to close the session. And from me, I think the key takeaway from the discussion is that we all have to be flexible and agile and patient, I think. And partnership is not only amongst corporations and companies, but also with the government. I think it's very key.